Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Here we go. At UNBOSSED, I interview amazing women in Chicago. There is so much woman power in this city that I want to provide these women a platform to tell their story. Please connect with us and please consider supporting by sharing, liking, commenting the podcast. Tell all your Netflix friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for a guest, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and donate by clicking on the anchor link and help me continue to make great episodes. I hope you enjoy and welcome to the show. Dorri McWhorter is President and CEO at the YMCA of Metro Chicago. Dorri joined the YMCA in August 2021. Before serving at the Y, Dorri was President and CEO at the YWCA Metropolitan Chicago from March 2013 and has led the organization transformation to a social enterprise, including the YWCA's expansion of digital services with the launch of yshop.org, womenhealthexchange.org, and the MPWR, spelled MPWR, mobile app. Dorri leverages her large-scale change experience from working over 20 years in management consulting to the work that the YWCA does to create social change. Dorri led the process for YWCA to develop the Exchange Trade Fund, ETF, for women's empowerment, in partnership with Impact Shares, which is the first nonprofit investment advisor to develop an EFT product. Dorri was included in the inaugural list of the Blue Network, comprised of the top 100 innovators in Chicago by Chicago's Tribune Blue Sky Innovation, and is a 2019 inductee in the Chicago Innovation Hall of Fame. Dorri serves on the board of directors for William Blair Funds and Skyway Concessions Company and Lifeway Foods, Inc. Dorri co-chairs the advisory board for First Women's Bank and is a civic and philanthropic leadership, includes the board of directors for the Chicago Center for Arts and Technology, 1871, Civic Consulting Alliance, and the Civic Federation. Dorri is also a member of the Illinois Charitable Trust Board. McWhorter received a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from University of Wisconsin-Madison and a Master of Business Administration degree from Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management. Lastly, an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters from Lake Forest College. Welcome, Dorri. Hey everybody, this is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. My guest today is Dorri McWhorter. She is the President and CEO of the YMCA Metro of Chicago. Welcome, Dorri.
Well, thank you, Marina. Happy to be here.
And I want to say right after that, congratulations on taking over a amazing institution in Chicago. I am super excited what you have, what we will see you do in this position as President and CEO of the Y.
Thank you.
Before we talk about your professional career and your leadership, I always like to ask in the beginning, can you tell us a story about you as a little girl? Where did you grow up? Maybe some influences that you've had in your life, and maybe how were you? Who did you want to be when you grew up?
Sure. So as a little girl, I actually was born in Chicago, and I've spent the first couple years of my life here. Then we moved to Racine, Wisconsin, just north of the city when I was a little girl. So I was raised there. And it's interesting. I've always been sort of super focused on being an accountant. And I only know this because when my parents were cleaning out some things, we found this letter that they saved from me that I wrote to Santa Claus when I was at a tender age of 11 and a half years old, so quite old relative to my beliefs, and I'm still a hopeful person. But in this letter to Santa, I asked three things. One, to make everyone alive today be okay. Two, to ask for a picture to prove that he was real, because clearly probably at 11 and a half, I was getting some pushback. And then the third thing is I asked my parents if I could be their accountant for a month. So I say that to say that it is documented that at an early age that I did want to be an accountant, and I knew the experience that led me there. So, so yes, I wanted to be an accountant as a child.
Wait, what happened with like the gifts?
Well, you know, albeit 30 years later, Santa delivered, right? Now I get to work in the human services space. So I'm working very hard to make everyone alive be okay. And second, he never produced a picture, but I still have faith that, you know, that the spirit of Santa Claus is a thing. And three, you know, I absolutely became an accountant, albeit probably at that point a good, well, I guess 20 years later. So Santa was late, but got it in time.
Nice. And did your parents ever let you be their accountant for that?
Oh God, they ask me all the time. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it now. So at that time, no, they would not let me complete their taxes. I was like, it's a 1040. I can do this. You know, they're like, no. They're like, no, no, and no. I was like, no, fine. Go pay those people to do it. I know I could do it. But like, specifically, you know, I really do feel, I wonder what was easy at that time. But I'm like, it's just following the numbers. It's just following the instructions, right? I was like, they walk you through this. They're like, yeah, no. Oh
my God. Where did you learn? I don't know. I'm thinking back at 11. I don't think I knew there was such a thing as an accountant. Where did you learn that?
So this is the crux of this whole thing, is that I did a book report. We had to do a nonfiction book report, and I happened to grab a book about an accountant. And in that book, it said that an accountant made $30,000 for 30 minutes at a board meeting. And I was really good at math. And so I was like, well, I should be an accountant then. And that was my logic. So ironically, it was because I wanted to sit at a board meeting and make $30,000.
And ironically, now you said how many boards?
Right, technically 3 corporate boards, but it's funny, and you got to spend way more than 30 minutes.
Oh my God, that is such a good story. Do you remember who was the accountant that you read about at all?
Like, no, you know what? In fact, I was going to Google, because you know how you can get text from Google sometimes. I was literally going to Google to see if I could find that book. So I was in 7th grade, so that would have been circa late 1900s. So so early, what would that have been, like early 80s, mid 80s?
Yeah.
And so I was tempted to go Google that to see if I could find that book again.
Nice. And so then, did you ever waived from your idea of being an accountant, or throughout school and high school, you're like, I
stayed there. Like, I took bookkeeping in high school. I was really focused on being an accountant. I took bookkeeping in high school to prepare me for college. And I enrolled, you know, fortunately I was able to participate in Enrolled. So I got to work in corporations as my internships throughout college. So I really stayed focused on it, you know, and of course my interests evolved over time. And I still, you know, am a CPA, and I still very much focus on, you know, understanding the language of business being accounting. Yeah. And I, you know, but even during my career, though, I was mostly in management consulting, but always having that accounting background, to me, all roads led to the numbers. And so how do, you know, we start with the numbers and perhaps back it up to understand what's driving those numbers. But at the end of the day, I'm like, it all roads in the numbers.
That is so, I am a little bit jealous. I have more of like a wavy career path where I'm like, I really know what I'm strongly passionate about, but I don't think there's like one role that like I want to be a blank that turns into me. And so anytime I meet somebody who's like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an accountant, I want to be an Austrian, I'm like, oh, good for you. You know exactly what you're going to do.
So I knew about the accounting, but the pathway relative to the career, because I've had many employers and consulting, and of course now being in human services. So the path has absolutely, to your point, Marina, has been very, very wavy and very indirect. Yeah. But underlying that was just my understanding of accounting.
Absolutely. I'm going to take you back, not further, like a little bit fast forward, but like still take you back in your past early career stage. How was that like for you going into accounting? Were there many women in accounting at your time? You mostly did corporate accounting too as a consultant, I imagine. And so Was it working mostly with men? Would you tell me your experience? Well, perhaps, your environment, but also like, how was the work at that time and how does it differ maybe from today?
Sure. So when I started my career, I started at one of the large public accounting firms. It was actually Arthur Andersen at the time. And what's interesting, I started at the Arthur Andersen office, in Chicago, which was its world headquarters location. And Andersen was quite unique. I learned over time just how unique it was in that we were really diverse for the accounting profession, which typically isn't that diverse. And so from an experience perspective, I actually still call them my group of girlfriends, my Andersen girls that we all met at our first year working at Andersen. And it was like these Black women that we bonded and still maintained our friendships. And then Andersen at that time really did a good job of bringing the people of color together. So we had this minority retention and recruitment committee that would plan events. And so I actually didn't know, because my world was so, particularly being at Arthur Andersen was so diverse, unlike my college experience where there was no other Black faces in the School of Business. That, being at a Big Ten school, University of Wisconsin specifically at the time, there were no other Black faces. In fact, I ran into a gentleman, like I graduated in December of 1995, I should say. And then in 2006, 2007, I met a gentleman and said, "Oh, you're Dorri. You were the last person to have graduated out of the accounting program at Madison, University of Wisconsin-Madison at the time." And it floored me to think, last Black person to have graduated. Yeah. And it floored me to think that 10 years, a decade could go by and to not have another graduate at a Big Ten school. Right.
Wow.
So that floored me, but it was also very reflective of the accounting profession. So for my career, even though I worked at an organization who was by any standards really diverse, even though now as I look back and understand that as you go up to the more senior ranks, particularly in the partner level, there wasn't a lot of diversity, but because I had my girls and I had, this committee that we called, which was effectively an affinity group of that time, it didn't feel so isolating. And so, but then as I continue to move through other organizations and other companies and continue to ascend in my career, you start recognizing that you are one of very, very few. Yeah. And in fact, when I became a partner at Crowe Horwath, and at that time, it was 2008, that I was their first Black partner, being it was 2008.
Congratulations.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about first, do they matter if you don't have a second? But we had a second, so that's good, and plus some now. Nice. But 2008. But at that time as well, even in a major metropolitan area like Chicago, for accounting partners in the large firms, so let's say that the top 10 accounting firms, I was the only Black female partner across the largest top 10 firms.
Wow.
So you realize just how difficult it can be to really get to the places that we want to be. Yeah. And you could tell because there is just such little representation there, and a lot hasn't changed. And even as you look now from an accounting partner perspective, it's still like 1% of partners are Black partners in large accounting firms. So yeah. So it's we still have so much work to do, and I hope that these numbers change pretty quickly, really soon.
Absolutely. What was your personal experience going through that and not seeing yourself represented in the higher ranks? Like now we recognize the power of feeling represented, of seeing someone that looks like you in a position of power, and the ability that has to really like keep people working, keep people in the jobs. So now we recognize that a little bit more. But did you feel some sort of way about it, or were you just focused on your career? How was that experience?
Yeah, in some ways, being at Madison with zero representation almost prepared me for the real world.
Yes.
So to that degree, allyship is a real thing, that I did have several, particularly white male partners that were really supportive of me, and because of them and their support of me, I should say, because I worked my butt off too, but because of their support of me, I know that I was able to get into those into those roles, into those positions. But at the same time, what I also did was not necessarily look inside of my organization, but I connected with senior leaders that were African-American outside of my organization as well. So I still kept sort of what, we would call that kitchen cabinet or whatever we call it now. But I kept those folks around me because you do need other role models to help you navigate and understand what's the best approach on things. And so I kept people like that close to me. And I was very fortunate throughout my career to be able to see those other folks and have them willing to be that sounding board and willing to be that role model and, mentor. Yes. But it was harder, of course, because those people weren't always in the same organization, but they could at least still offer their support and counsel.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Do those allies, did they come to you? Did you come to them? For people that are seeking support within their organization, and now you being an ally for so many other people as well, like, how would you suggest they would go about it, finding sponsors, finding allies that can really support their career growth in a place where they don't feel represented or recognized?
Yeah, it's interesting. I always, figure out no one says, oh, I'm a mentor and I'm a sponsor, right? So the most important thing is you find people that connect with you and that you connect with and that want to support you, regardless of how you categorize them in sort of your book of friends, right? But I think it's something that you have to be proactive about, because no one came to me and like, Dorri, how can I help you, be all you want to be, right? It was like, okay, I know that I want to do this. Who in this environment can help me do that? I need to reach out to them. And because we then established relationships with each other and, they clearly saw that what I was capable of as well. But it was something that I had to proactively do. And I just don't think we can get around that. No one is waiting to support you. Yeah. And so you just have to really take your career into your own hands. Because there's just no one that's going to sort of look out for you like you.
Absolutely.
And that's not to be, and I don't want to misconstrue that like you got to do it yourself. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you have to recognize what you want and assess how you can make that happen and then work with the right people to do that.
Yeah, kind of take ownership of your own career.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. And seek the need seek the need that you want so that you can, use that as relationships, obviously genuine relationship, but to build that up into your goals, right?
Absolutely.
And I think one of the questions that come up a lot is especially like promotion and ascension. We are in industry that are notoriously like white dominated. I feel like minorities, and I am in similar positions a lot of time. I have a hard time understanding how do I get myself placed for a promotion? How do I talk about it in a way that they can see me as a potential for promotion? Because sometimes it's completely unconscious. Like they don't know that I want it, and so they don't even think of me, but they may think of somebody else that just happens to be there that looks like them. Mm-hmm. Do you have any suggestions for people like me that they're trying to get to that executive level, and or women and men that are trying to get the next promotion? How do we place ourselves in a position to be recognized for the next steps?
Yeah, I think that we have to own that for ourselves. And so understand and assess who could be helpful and who needs to know, because you have to sometimes just be explicit. People do not connect the dots unless you connect them for them, right? And so you have to go and say, you don't necessarily go to someone and say, I want this position, so how do I get it? But what you do go to some people and say, I'm thinking about my career and how I can advance, and I would love your insights as to what that looks like, because this is something that I want to accomplish and it's really important to me. So I think that there's just ways that you can be nuanced but thoughtful around how you articulate what you want, and so that the right people hear it. But then also, because unless they know it and have that sort of dot, they won't connect it. And then further, you have to say, well, these are the things that I think that I've been working on that I think should position me. What else do you think I should be doing? Or, so I think involve people, because once people engage themselves with you, it's just a deeper entrenchment in their mind, right? Because to me, it's all about mind share. And we all have so many things competing for our mind and our attention all the time. And so while this is why bias is fascinating to me, because bias absolutely are the things that we know the best. So we jump back to whatever that has been ingrained in us. So I say then we need to ingrain new things in people. So when they go to their biases, that bias choice is different, right? So,
yes, absolutely.
I'm trying to do Inception type of stuff here, right? I'm trying to get deeply ingrained, embedded in your mind.
You would only think of me the next time you have a position of
exactly. Follow my hands.
Oh, that is such good advice. I like that a lot. Early career, biggest success.
Let's see. I'm so proud of, when I was a baby auditor. I participated when I was at Arthur Andersen at the time, I participated in what they were calling their business audit masters. And it was when Andersen was on the verge of changing a lot of their methodology and really trying to approach clients in a different way. And because I was part of this process and performed an audit for this company under sort of this new approach or process, they brought my audit findings to the board. And I was like, oh my goodness. And it was like my second year as a new staff member. And they called me because I transferred from Chicago office to the Atlanta office. And they're like, Dorri, your findings are being presented to the board today. And this was a major Fortune 500 company. And I was so proud of myself. But what that taught me at that time was that the work that I did by really driving in, understanding the business process, understanding and learning from the people, that has been something that I have applied throughout my entire career. Like being a consultant, I say that most that we do is go to people that actually do the work and understand what should be done, and then go tell the people that can actually change it, right? But that's how I also approach human service work. I'm in community. What needs to happen here, right? Then how can I leverage the rooms that I'm in to make that happen? So I feel like I'm just a consultant, but this time in the human services space.
Oh, that's beautiful. What was the biggest accounting block? Wrong numbers, because I know there's some wrong numbers there.
What's interesting? It's not necessarily on my bad wrong numbers, but I've seen where companies have just had horrible business processes that have led to highly undesirable results. And so my thing is where, all roads lead to the numbers, but the numbers are at that point sort of canaries in the mine. Like they're telling you something is wrong with the business, something is wrong with the business. And it's up to us to go and look at what's wrong in the business, right? And so, I've been in organizations where you can tell bad business processes have produced this information, right?
Okay.
So for me, it's less about the accuracy of the numbers and the numbers just really being indicative of poor business process. And so how do you, even when I worked at the YWCA, I could tell that the numbers, while they were accurate, it pointed to a bad business model, right? So when I came into the organization, we were a $10 million organization losing about $1 million a year. Why is that, right? So as we then unlocked that and really dug into what is the business that's producing these numbers, that's where we saw the change. So now we're a $40 million organization, break it even and doing our thing. So up until the time I left, I should say.
Absolutely.
But that's where we were able to go. So to me, it's been about the numbers being indicative of what's happening, and then how do we go change what's happening?
Absolutely. I have a similar feeling as well. Like I remember my first early careers, our CFO, one of the companies, kept showing up the numbers on big screen, and this is our balance sheet, and this is where the money is going, big buckets, things like that. And it's so true that you say, even just looking at your P&L, you can tell where is the money is going, and really try to dig in those buckets that are the biggest, kind of like the flashing at you, and it's like, this is not right here in this line. Once you have identified kind of like those areas, I'm assuming you kind of start from something like that high level. What is, maybe if you could illustrate a process of somebody that has a business right now or is looking into understanding what is problematic financially about, or they have potential about their business. What is your next step? What do you go next into in order to understand the business process behind that?
So often what I do, because what happens is that we often look at numbers, and I say it's like the tail wagging the dog, right? We often look at numbers and say, we need these numbers to change. Why aren't these numbers changing? And then so at that point, as we talked about, yes, you start looking at, okay, what's the business process? What's driving the numbers? What's happening in the numbers? So it's what, like, not only the business process, but then the process quickly gets you to, well, what's our strategy? What is this process designed to do? And if that process is designed to do that, and this is what it's delivering, then we need to change that too. And if that's not what we want to see happen, then we need to change the strategy. So they're so all interconnected, but we often talk about them so separately, right? So I was just talking to somebody as we were looking at the budget and closing out the budget process at the YWCA before I moved to the YMCA. And I was saying that you can't separate the numbers from the budget from the narrative about the strategy. Like those two things go hand in hand. And so I always think it's important that, to me, it's like looking in the mirror, not liking what you're seeing, but trying to change the image in the mirror. That doesn't work, right? You have to change the actual thing that's being reflected, right? And I feel like that's how business works, and that's what ultimately numbers become. And so I'm always encouraging people, if you identify something that doesn't look right from a number perspective, really then jump all the way back and say, okay, what are we trying to do? What is the strategy here? What are we trying to accomplish? And then work your way back through that process.
Totally. Got it. Okay. That's a perfect summary. Thank you so much for giving me that. And so at some point you decided to get an MBA. How was that decision for you? Did you have any doubts? People are thinking about secondary education nowadays. Is it still worth it? Is it not worth it? You obviously went to a prestigious university, Northwestern University. And actually, I was going to ask you, because MBA are notoriously for looking and evaluating businesses potentially in the future even. So the way I think about accounting versus finance is kind of like accounting looks at the past and finance looks at the future. And how is that transition for you as well?
Sure. So when I decided to get my MBA, it's interesting is that, because I have an accounting background, I wanted to continue this evolution from a business consulting perspective and continue down the leadership path, because I didn't want to get pigeonholed and only being able to go after CFO jobs or accounting related jobs. Because I do care a lot about strategy, that I wanted to be able to have the credentials to match the strategic thinking that I already felt was some of my sort of innate thinking. And I actually will back up a little bit too. I should say that when I was at University of Wisconsin-Madison, I did major in accounting, and also they didn't have minors there, so we had so I had a double major in what they called HR management, which essentially at that time it was total quality management, all of the business process improvement type stuff. And then thirdly, because I did not have minors, I would have had to stay another semester to major in African American studies. And I, at that point, said, no, I need to get up out of here. I'm not about to pay you and get a negative return for that additional degree, right? Or that additional major, I should say. But having said that, I think that, that actually was very reflective of the things I was interested in. So yes, accounting, yes, broader business management, and yes, African American studies. So for me, all of those things really have been able to culminate into what I do today, really in the human services space. But having said that, as I made a decision to go get my MBA, it was a broader thinking that I didn't want to, because my career had been spent in accounting and management consulting, that I didn't want to get pigeonholed. I did want to be in leadership roles that I could run organizations, run divisions, things like that. And so I actually decided to go get my MBA when I was working at a company called Snap-on Tools at the time, and saw that if I did want to become a division leader or have a P&L responsibility, that I would need to couple my accounting degree with an MBA. So that was the catalyst for that. And of course, I chose Northwestern, being in the Midwest especially. And already, there's always this University of Chicago versus Northwestern type of thing. And because I had a technical background, I chose Northwestern so that I could be more well perceived as being more well-rounded too. Right? So that, the Kellogg booth thing is kind of funny.
Did you, I sometimes found this, I have this conflict inside of me where I'm like, I want them to perceive me a specific way, and I need to go get this degree in order for them, whomever them are, to perceive me this way. I know I can do it now. I find it hard to just do it in order to change the perception. Do you ever had that conversation with yourself, and how did you?
Yeah, well, particularly, it is a perception thing, right? Part of it is that, talk about bias, right? That, having certain degrees or having certain degrees from certain institution comes with it the perception of what those degrees or institutions may or may not be, right? And ultimately the person reinforces that perception or not. And so that was part of my decision, was absolutely how people will perceive me as a more technical person or as a more business oriented person as I chose where to go. And I think it is a real thing, right? Because people do have their biases and their how they correlate things. And so, but at the end of the day, you still have to decide what's best for you. But, part of it is, Marina, too, as I know you recognize that everything that we do is part of how we build our brand, right? Mm-hmm. And build how we do want people to perceive us. Mm-hmm. And so I've been thoughtful about that along the way of making sure the perception is also aligned to who I really am. Mm-hmm. And so even when I chose the school I wanted to go to, I felt not in addition to just the perception that Booth is considered more finance and technical compared to Kellogg, more marketing and general management oriented, but that actually who is what I was. And so, or what I am, I should say. And so I wanted to choose a school to really reflect all of that.
Mm. Yeah, that is exactly it. Like, we are building a brand in order to do the things that we want to do. I think a lot of time my conflict is that I wonder if other people are subject to the same type of bias and
they are
perception issues that
right. Well, and that's why you see people that choose Harvard and people, we all, as human beings, we all are, right? Unfortunately, though, sometimes our choices also have to sort of overcompensate for other people's perceptions of us anyway. So we got to make those things work even harder for us, right? Yeah, because we know that those perceptions are present.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you specifically about working for the city. You were there for a few years. I think you were doing more private work before that. Am I correct? And then
so technically, part of it is that what I've done, how I set up my LinkedIn, is that I sat on different sort of commissions for the city. Okay. So not necessarily an employee of the city, but like the Public Safety Commission, I sat on a strategic planning, I guess it was kind of an advisory council for Mayor Rahm Emanuel's second term. It was initially called a transition committee, but there was no transition when you're the incumbent. So it was more of a strategic initiatives area. So my work for the city has not been an employee, but more as in commission advisory capacity.
Yeah. And so I guess my question went from private sector, seeing government, and now seeing nonprofit work. How has these three different experiences molded maybe your perception of what business is like, or maybe your leadership even, and how has it molded you as a leader?
Sure. One of the things it has absolutely done is that it has really allowed me to dig into some of my core philosophies as a human. And what I mean by that is that, I do believe that, whether we call it business, however we participate in the marketplace, right? In the marketplace being those things that are exchanged, goods and services that are exchanged for human need, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, that's what a marketplace is.
Yeah.
And so being able to see all the different sectors of the marketplace, like business, like government, like human services or nonprofits, has really allowed me to underscore those philosophies and beliefs that all of these are channels to, one, create a better human experience if they're done well.
Yeah.
And then two, continue to be ways to organize people, whether it's through society and culture. And so, for me, it really has been about I tend to create what is the lowest common denominator between any of these things. And that's why we are all marketplace participants, right?
Yes.
With different tools available to us to create and contribute to the marketplace differently. And so that's been sort of my perspective. So now it's just been about me leaning into, of these spaces, which institutions, organizations within these sectors really allow me to bring my talents to the marketplace in ways that I hope continue to advance society. So that's how I think about it. So even when I made the switch from going to the YWCA to the YMCA, people were like, why'd you do that? What is that about, right? Because it wasn't necessarily perceived as, oh, she went from private to public. The narrative, when I first went to the YWCA, other people's narrative, never my narrative, was like, oh, she's going to do good. I'm like, I was always doing good. What are you talking about, right? In my mind, though, good was defined as creating a better human experience. So I guarantee you the people I work with, I treated well, and my clients, I treated well. So in my mind, I was always doing good. The YWCA just allowed me to do that on a broader community basis. So that was the first thing. So then as I went from the YWCA to the YMCA, people are like, what is she doing, right? But part of that for me is that it is about continuing to create a better human experience, but using the YMCA as the platform that has different tools than the YWCA has. Not better, just different because of the different type of work we do. And so my goal is to continue to create a better world using as many channels as I have the skill set possible to do. And I see work as a channel to do that.
Absolutely. I also thought, looking at your resume, speaking of transitions and things like that, you've held a number of amazing positions, and I wonder about one. I think what is two questions, but they're very related. One is how long do you stay at a job, and when is it time to go? And how do you evaluate those opportunities as they present themselves? I wonder if you can give me a little bit of insight, because you've held a number of really awesome positions, and I wonder how do you think about that?
Sure. First of all, I always start with, what is my center of joy, right? Like, what makes me happy? And that's a real thing. And people often don't start there. And I start there because I got to be happy. At the end of the day, that's what life's about. A joyless life is not a life. I got to be happy. So that's the first thing. I really do think about, what is my center of joy? Like, what really makes me happy, and what in this work will allow me to be happy? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, does the work that align with my skill sets in the way that I want to contribute to society? Because that's all work is at the end of the day. It's a way we all contribute to society. And so does it allow me to contribute in the ways that I'm equipped to do? So whether it's accounting, leadership, whatever the case may be, is the work aligned to how I want to contribute to society? And thirdly, is that alignment visible through the compensation, right? So I think about compensation too, because it is important, because again, we're all part of a marketplace. So do I have alignment around all those things? Can I really create an impact? Am I compensated based on the impact I'm going to create, as well as this is something that's going to make me happy? So, I don't get necessarily formalistic with it as much as formalistic, if that's a word.
Formulaic.
Thank you. So many people are much better in the English language than I am. So thank you. But those are the things that I think about. But I really do start with what's going to make me happy. And that's also, by the way, when I also begin to think about it's always a factor of those three things, right? Because even choosing to move from the YMCA to the YWCA, it really was about what else can I be doing in the world? And I saw this as an opportunity. It's like, they got different tools. I can work with those tools too. Yes. And so that's what pulled me to the YMCA. And yes, I could find joy there. And then, yes, I can find alignment to make sure that I'm also being compensated for what I think I'm going to bring to the world.
Amazing. Awesome. I have a personal interest in asking you this because I am seeking board seats for startups or advisory positions for companies. I am really enjoying advising friends and really small early stage startups. How does a woman that is seeking a board seat goes about getting one?
Yeah, it's interesting. One, I do think, just like we talked about from a promotion perspective, letting people know that you're interested. Mm-hmm. So two, within your network, talking to folks, and not just people who currently sit on boards, but people that are in your network that that can speak to or be in places where if board conversations come up, they're like, oh, I know somebody. Or because what I've learned, I know that there's formal search processes, and it's interesting. All three of my boards, I got through three very different processes. So, but when it comes to that? Yeah, sure. Yeah. A couple of them have come through knowing the CEOs and being referred by the CEOs. Right. But knowing the CEOs has been a matter of being active in the marketplace and participating on other things where people got to see how I worked and how I thought and how I behaved, right? So they were able to say, when those opportunities came up, they're like, hey, I know somebody. Plus, it did not hurt by any means that I am a CPA, so have that background. Yes. That also allowed, because all boards need financial experts. And so that helped a lot. And so, but it also happened that that people knew who I was. And so they could speak directly to their experiences with me, and that being part then of being put forward for that nomination process. And then also the other one was through a search firm. And but again, even being referred to the search firm was a matter of folks sort of knowing my expertise and knowing of me enough to be able to recommend or refer.
Okay. And you said maybe there was a third way. So search firm, knowing somebody, and then I think the third one was the network reach out.
Yep. And reaching out to your network, and just, and because you just never know who knows who, and the world is so small, even though it's over 7.5 million people, but it's so small that people knowing your interests really helps. And so I still do that to this day, is have informational conversations with folks about boards, because you just never know who knows who and how you can support or connect. Or when people reach out to me and I'm like, oh, I can't do it, but I know someone who can, right? Yeah. So, because I do feel like once you do get on a board, more people reach out because you're already sort of pre-qualified to some degree.
Exactly.
When you're dating someone, then of course everyone else wants to date you.
When you're not dating anybody, nobody wants to.
No one comes, right?
I'm also super curious about becoming big boss. Okay. That first day as a CEO of a company. I'm preparing myself. I'm going to be big boss. Okay. I'm putting it out in the universe right now.
Yes.
I want to be prepared for my first day as a big boss, right? If you had to tell me, what advice would you give me to be a big boss? What do you think?
I often think about, electronic devices that, you need to pair to stay in learning mode, because you never know. I actually reject the word boss sometimes, because boss presumes that and that you got this covered. Okay. And you're in constant learning mode. So the first thing I would say is that you need to learn. And my perspective is that you always learn from your people.
Yes.
So to me, like literally, starting at the YWCA, now starting at the YMCA, the first thing I do is I got to meet with the people. I need to learn the business from the people that know it. And that's why I say I always, I never lost that sort of characteristic or trait from my consulting days. I go right to the people.
Perfect.
The closer you are to the people that know the work, the better off you are. And I need that perspective in my life, right? So the first thing you do, stay in learn mode, because there will always be a lot to learn.
Yeah.
And the best source of that learning is absolutely from the people doing the work.
Nice. And as a CEO of a company, and I'm not going to specifically ask you to give me your YMCA plan, but how do you think about your first 30, 60, 90 days?
The first 30, 60, 90 days is all about stakeholder engagement to me. I need to understand who are the stakeholders and what they're thinking about, what their expectations are, and learn from that, and then chart a course from there. So that first 30, 60, 90 days, depending on the size of the organization, depending on the complexity of the organization, is really about learning the business, learning it through the lens of the people that the business most applies to, right? So whether it's employees, the customers, the YMCA case, it would be the donors. In other company cases, it may be the investors. But really understanding and reaching out to those stakeholders and those constituents to begin understanding what their experiences have been, what their perception is of the organization, and it will allow me to sort of chart that course about what needs to happen next.
Absolutely. And having been on boards, you already can deal with boards. So you already have that experience.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think, we are like on our prep, we talked about why is this work so important to you? And I wanted you to share this message because YMCA is a huge institution, the YWCA as well, but the YMCA I feel like is more known.
Yeah.
Huge community institution. What is the perception, maybe market perception, people perception, and what is your vision? What do you want to hope to turn that into?
Yeah, so for me, it's just that I love this work so much because out of all the businesses that you could do in the world, this is the business that absolutely is directly impacting people's lives. And technically all businesses impact people's lives. So, but in terms of human services, right, that
yes.
the business is that of human well-being.
Yes.
And so for me, it is how do we support as many humans as we can in their well-being, and what does that look like? What support's needed, what challenges needs to be addressed, and what barriers need to be removed to be able to allow people to do that. And so my big vision is that, I think about, as we sit here in 2021, that what does 2121 look like? What will 2121 look like if we are thinking about that today? How will the lives of the people in 2121 be different? I think about where we sit today and, 400 years ago, over 400 years ago, right? People's lives were significantly different than the ones we have now. And as we fast forward century by century, we sit here in a very privileged place today to make decisions, to take actions that will absolutely impact the lives of the people in the next 100 years. So for me, I can't help but think about what can I do today so that people in 100 years are not fighting for equality anymore?
Absolutely. And specifically, community centers like the Y have been so important to marginalized community, a place of gathering, a place of support for mothers, a place for activities, for fun, for children. I am particularly excited to see that revitalized, like even better, bigger in some ways, and really like go back to those community centers and take my kids there.
Yeah, no, I think it's important as you mentioned that, in Chicago, Carter G. Woodson, who's known for being the founder of Black History Month, had that discovery at the 47th and Wabash YMCA. So as he convened with folks there about the progress of Black Americans in the early 1900s and what that could be and what that could look like, it ultimately, went from a week celebration of recognizing Black history and and Black people's accomplishments in this country to ultimately becoming Black History Month. So when you think about the importance of community spaces to create that support and that safety to some degree, to be able to have that conversation and to be able to help people, because people forget just how important safety is, because we know when people are in fight or flight mode, they don't even access their full intellectual capacity, right? And so to be in a safe environment where you can explore what's possible and what's next and really imagine the future and imagine how we can contribute and create a different world and all of those things that come with it, house by house, community by community, those spaces are really important, right? And so I'm glad that I continue to be part of an organization who has to have that, or not has to have that, but has that as a part of their mission.
I think that's so beautiful. And I love your vision for the why and your thoughtfulness, the thought that you're putting into this company. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And believe it or not, we are almost at time.
Oh my goodness.
Just like that.
This has been so amazing talking with you. Thank you for listening to me rant.
No, this is perfect. And before you go, I have a few outros questions that I like to ask my guests. You ready?
Yes.
What is one thing that we don't know about you that you would like to share?
Oh, I'm so not private. There's so much people know about me.
Are you a cat lover, a dog lover?
Oh my God, I'm a dog lover, but I feel like everybody knows that. If you follow me on Facebook, you see dancing old people and dogs. That's my thing. Big dog lover, full-fledged dog mom, member of the American Association of Pet Parents. I mean, I go hard. It's AAPP, so the American Association of Pet Parents, Association of American Pet Parents. I'm a pet parent, yes, big time.
Nice. What is a book that you have gifted the most that you recommend? I love books, so I always like to for our community.
Sure. The book that I've gifted the most is twofold. One, it's Career Mapping by Jenny Clark, Ginny. And what I love about that book is that when people come to me for career advice, she has this concept about free agency and how we should think about how we contribute to companies. Therefore, we should seek jobs and tell companies the jobs they need to put us in versus us applying for jobs, which I love that concept, right? Yeah. And then the second one is more of a self-help spiritual one, is the Prayer of Jabez. One, because it's just such a simple read, but it's just a reminder that the universe is so abundant, and how do we embrace and engage there.
What is that title again?
The Prayer of Jabez.
Got it.
Yeah.
Great. What is a book you would write?
How to Lead with Love.
Oh, beautiful. What would you like? Is that all you're gonna give me?
I just, it's come up a lot for me lately, particularly as I transition from the YWCA to the YMCA, and I know that I've left an impression on the YWCA that has been full of love, and the people there know that I valued and loved them. And I just want that to be something that we all do as business leaders, to really remind people, that we as leaders have such we're so fortunate in a privileged position to impact people's lives. And if we do that through the lens of love, we can just make such a greater impact. And so leading with love, I'm gonna write that book because I'm taking notes.
That's perfect. And that is a perfect ending to this interview. I thank you so much for coming, and I hope you come back. I'm going to call you a year into the YMCA and see how it's going.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Marina. Thank you for having me, and good luck. I love talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Woo! There you have it. I hope you liked this episode, and please don't forget to share, like, comment on the podcast link. Tell all your Northwestern friends and family about it. Submit a recommendation for guests at www.unbossed.io. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Donate by clicking on the anchor link, and help me continue to make great episodes. You can find all this information on www.unbossed.io. See you next time. Oh, that was good.